All right, last chapter for this week, and we're talking about the social foundations of expectations. I think you might probably most likely, hopefully, somewhat familiar with expectations. I think in the 80s and 90s, that was one core concept that penetrated basically every aspect of psychology, especially clinical psychology. And it was the idea that if we have to change something about people, then it is their expectations, because they influence so many different aspects of their lives. And I just say, in my own research, especially in my PhD research, the power of expectation was there in basically every data set. So I can just underline that. Just to kind of remind you a little bit of what expectations are, I think we're still kind of exploring the last aspect of expectation value theories, right? So here, perceived control or control beliefs, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about expectations in the framework of the theory of planned behavior. Sometimes most people call them expectations, their outcome expectations, their self-efficacy expectations, their control expectations. There are many different forms of expectations. The most popular, the most influential is self-efficacy beliefs. And this is basically what at some point Eisen accepted to add to his theory, because at the beginning he only had these two components in the theory of reasoned action. But then they added the perceived control, and you can see here the power of the expectations in this concept. Most often you can find empirically and in the depiction of the theory as well that expectation alone influence behavior. So even people might not really strongly feel like they want to perform the behavior. Once they feel they're capable of performing their behavior, there's an increased chance that it will actually perform that behavior. So if you're confident that you can practice for at least exercise for at least 20 minutes 3 times per week for the next 3 months, if you feel like that, then you're most likely to do that. So powerful predictor of behavior, kind of relates in the theory of planned behavior about if you feel capable of performing that behavior. And you can see this is very strongly linked to ideas about your own intelligence, your own ability to own your self-control. So this is very much linked to your self-concept and key beliefs that you have about yourself and what you're capable of. So by now you feel like, well, I know all of that, Andreas, tell me something new. Why is this something social? Okay. There are many, many different social aspects. I want to highlight maybe 2 or 3, can't remember. But let's walk through it and then we'll see how many I will highlight. First, let's just have a little case example here. Imagine there are 2 twin sisters. These are depicted here in the left corner, and these 2 twin sisters both apply to go to super prestigious university. Let's say this is Harvard, okay? They both have the potential, they both have the academic abilities. They're basically not just genetically the same person. But for some strange reason, one of them ends up at Harvard and one goes to a slightly lesser university. Okay, something like NYU or something similar. Not quite Harvard, yet still a great school. So now the question is that you have to predict is who will thereafter earn more money? The student who, by a stroke of luck, got into Harvard, or the student that maybe by a stroke of luck got not into Harvard? And if you can compare students who narrowly missed going to a prestigious universities with those that made it in, you can see that those that narrowly missed, surprise, surprise, have the higher earnings. They have the higher lifetime earnings. So it's much better to narrowly miss Harvard than to get into Harvard. So how can that be? How is it possible that not getting into Harvard is much better for you than getting into Harvard? And the idea here is what is called the big fish, little pond effect. So if you go into Harvard, you're surrounded by other superstars. There are people who maybe you're in the middle of the pack, but you're somewhat surrounded now by a lot lot of big fish and it's a little pond. Okay. So what happens is that you yourself, in comparison, have very much less academic beliefs about your abilities. You form relatively low and meager expectations about your own capabilities. And these expectations about your own capabilities, these expectations was often summarized at your academic self-concept, are much stronger a predictor than getting into Harvard. But then on the other hand, you go into this somewhat lesser school, but now you're surrounded by lesser students as well, and you're kind of like the superstar. And now you feel like you're the queen of the world, and hence this is a really strong predictor, and this leads you to have fantastic lifetime earnings, have a very successful career. And by this example, by the big fish, little pond effect, right, this kind of highlights that we are constantly trying to figure out who we are, if we're good, if you're intelligent, if you're beautiful, if you're popular, and so forth, right? And this social comparison leads us to form ideas about ourselves. And this is obviously not done in a vacuum, but it is done in a social context. Depending on your social context, you will form different ideas about your intelligence, for instance, even though you have a certain set of, in context A, you might feel like you're super intelligent, and in context B, you might feel like you're an idiot. I had colleagues when I was at Oxford who went to Harvard and came back and felt terrible. They said, like, man, I thought I was really good, and then I went to Harvard and everybody was better than me. You know, they were kind of depressed about themselves and felt like they were found out, okay? Same ability. In Oxford, they were considered material to go to Harvard, and they came back and had somewhat identity crisis. So it's really important for us to kind of figure out who we are by comparing ourselves to others. This could be beneficial, as you see, if you're a big fish in a small pond, or if you're a big fish in a big pond, if you went into the lesser university. I'm not sure if I get the metaphor right here. Or this could be bad for you if everyone who you compare yourself to is somewhat better than you, or at least perceived better than you. And you can think about this not only as your physical, the people that you're physically surrounded by, but also mentally. What is your reference group? If you think about your beauty, if you think about your intelligence, if you think about how nice you are, if you think about how good of a son or daughter you are, with whom do you compare yourself? And this will strongly influence the expectations you have about yourself. So expectations are at the heart something very social. But there's some more to that. Here's a famous study that you're familiar with, which is often now kind of taken as the foundation of experimental demand, and this is the Rosenthal effect. I hope you're familiar with this study. I just quickly summarize it, right? It was done in the 60s and was replicated many times. And basically what happens is, like, let's imagine you're the teacher and I come in, I'm a scientist, and I tell you, you know what, I want to test your 1, 2, 3, 4, 12 students in your class, and I will tell you who are the 6 students with the really high potential and who are the 6 students who have somewhat lower potential. Unbeknownst to you, I would just randomly assign students to one of two groups. I would call the ones on the right the high potential group, and even though they were randomly assigned to that, and the group on the left, the low potential group. I would tell you that. I would tell you, look, the ones on the right, this is the group that has really high potential, and the ones on the left, this is the group that has not so much a high potential. And then, lo and behold, a year later, 2 years later, what you can see is that the group that were told that they were good actually became good. A kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. So there are some behavioral effects, but it's just to kind of summarize here that, and it's a really powerful effect that kind of, I mean, obviously we're trying in our experiments to kind of shield ourselves strongly from experimental demand, but experimental demand also exists outside of experiments, where the expectation a teacher has about students, the expectations your parents have about you, the expectations your friends have about you have a powerful impact on your achievements. So this is not just that basically your expectations, the people around you influence what kind of expectation you have, but how the expectations other people have about you powerfully impact your behavior. This is something which I don't have much time to talk about here, but that Kara Rusbold, and I will attach to Moodle an article about it called the Angelo effect. And she studied intimate couples, married couples. And what she did is she kind of showed that there's this idea of the Angelo effect. Angelo here means that is the famous artist, and he would look at a block of marble and he would kind of say, oh, I see something amazingly beautiful in this block of marble, and all I have to do is kind of peel the outer layers away and reveal that David or whatever it is to the world. And so according to Kara Rusbold and her colleagues, can you do that? People who are really successful, in quotations mark, spouses, right? They look at their partners and they see something amazing in them, and they have super high expectation in some sense, and now all they do is they reveal basically what the partner is, what they think the partner is, what they see in the partner is, and that helps the partner tremendously grow and to feel happy, and also contributes tremendously to successful marriages. So this is something, and if you ever met Kara Rusbold, unfortunately died a few years ago, but if you ever met her, then you became a believer, because being around her was a true experience of the Michelangelo effect. I rarely felt as comforted, as encouraged, as motivated as being around Carol. So there's something powerful about the people that surround us that influence our expectation. That's the first lesson, right? The second lesson is, but the expectation people hold about me have a powerful impact about me. So if I want to change somebody's expectations, the first thing I can do is kind of see if I change the reference group or change their social group so their expectations get better. Or I can kind of try to change the expectations people around that person have, and they will start to behave differently around that person, and thereby nurture and help them to flourish. But there's also something where, like, well-intended intervention often fail, and they kind of communicate between the lines a really low expectation. So remember when we talked about vice expectations, that one of the key ideas here is that basically whenever somebody approaches me in the framework of an intervention, the other person is trying to figure out, what is this person trying to tell me about myself? What does that mean? So imagine that I would go to the university and there are 20 students in the room, and then I figure out that only I got an invitation to participate in a preparatory academic skills. So I feel like, oh, okay, why it's just me, not others? What is it about me that they feel like I need something like that? And what is it about the others that they don't need it? So that's a powerful message. But often also more directly, we learn about the expectations others hold for us, and they have a powerful impact on us. So here are two examples from health psychology. You might know it if you're taking Katie's class, but here there's one study. This is like about 5 a day versus just one more. Okay, so the research says, oh, you know what? People don't eat 5 a day. They eat 3 a day. They eat 4 a day, but they rarely eat 5 vegetables and fruits a day. How can we do that? And so it's like, oh, you know what? It would be awesome if they would just eat one more serving per day more. We don't want to burden them with too much. We don't want to expect too much from them. Why don't we just tell them, instead of 5 a day, just one more? Okay, try to eat just one more serving a day. So what they find here in the results is that if people are told to 5 a day, which is kind of the high expectation condition, then people on average, ironically, eat one more serving per day of fruit and vegetables. But just one more led to plus minus 0. So what you can see here is that this communication of low expectation impacts also the kind of goals we set and the belief we have what we can do, okay? If somebody comes to me and says, hey, just do your best. I think it's great what you're doing already. Maybe you can do a tiny little bit more. Then I feel like, that's it. But if somebody comes and communicates really strong, high expectation for me, that has a much more powerful effect on me. This is similar where here, this is one medical doctor who's blogging about this research. And he said now they're like in exercise, they're doing the same. It's just like some physical activity is better than none. And often people say, like, instead of telling us, you know what, you should need to do 150 minutes of active exercise each week or 200 minutes each week, that would be good. It's like, you know what, if you just do a little bit, that's fine. I think that's something I'm often frustrated with the way the university communicates with you guys. It's just like a constant stream of like, just try your best, just try a little bit better. No, I think we all have high expectations for you, and we should clearly communicate them.